Welcome everyone, once again to another one of my videos. This is the fifth and final part in my series Realising No Self, realising that there is no inherent self, breaking the first fetter. This is the final part in the series. What I'm going to cover in this particular video is, first of all, just to finish off what I think I missed out on, awareness and consciousness. So I'll do awareness and consciousness just quickly, relatively straightforward. Then I shall move on to a few further pointers, a few pointers to what we can find at the end and how it all fits in. Maybe a few pointers to allow people not to fall into nihilism and see how this realization fits in with everything, and how you can go on from having this realization to having further realizations and how it fits in with that as well. And just a pointer, this is the fifth and final part in the series. Please make sure you go through the series in order, one by one, because what I'm mentioning here won't make sense. It won't be useful to you until you've actually seen the other videos, because what I'm saying here needs to be seen in context with everything else within the path and structure of the 5 videos that I've set out. So let us do awareness and consciousness. And when I mention that, it's specifically separate consciousness, a personal awareness, a personal consciousness, as opposed to some sort of global thing which is used in many spiritual traditions. Relatively straightforward. If we go to our thoughts, ideas about what I'm talking about, we have I am conscious, I am aware. We could also say this body is aware, this body is conscious, as a separate thing. That this body, being separate, is aware and conscious of everything else in the world. The body is a separate thing to everything else in the world. And those are ideas about it. So again, if we go and look, actually use our senses, what can we find? Can we find an I that is aware? Can we find a self that is conscious? Do we actually find a body that is aware? Do we find a body that is conscious? Or is it more like there is awareness, there is consciousness? In the same way as the pointer for the senses, there is an experience. Are there two separate things to be found? A self that is conscious or aware, and a world, or whatever, that the self is being conscious or aware of. Do you actually find that? Or is it just an idea, a belief? Hopefully you realise the only thing to be found is what there is aware of, or what there is to be conscious of. Just in the same way as a current experience. There is just what can be experienced. The self cannot be found. So we realise there is no inherent self that is aware, that is conscious. It is only an idea, a belief, just like all the other examinations. So we've gone through all the examination, which is equivalent, as I said in the first video or the introduction, to the skandhas. Avalokiteshvara looked into the skandhas and found them empty of a self, and that is what is effectively we've done here. Okay, so we looked at the senses, choice and control, mental formations, and also awareness and consciousness just then. Hopefully you will have realised that a self, an inherent self, cannot be found. The only thing we have is our beliefs, ideas and thoughts about a self. We don't actually find a self. And all the way through this I've kind of said that. Our beliefs and thoughts about a self. But just consider that for a moment. Our beliefs and thoughts about a self. That would suggest a self that has beliefs and thoughts. Is there such a self? Is there such an inherent self that has beliefs and thoughts? Hopefully you'll realise, no. The suggestion there is a self with beliefs and thoughts is just an idea, just another belief. And many people come to the end of the path and think, well, okay, now what? And there's a couple of pointers to that what is expected? If it is expected that thoughts will stop, okay, that must mean that there is an inherent self having the thoughts. Is there? Hopefully you'll realise, no, there is no inherent self having the thoughts. But the thought itself contains I. The ideas we have, I think, I am here, I am making a video, I am talking to a camera, I am in control, I am choosing what to say, etc., etc., etc. Surely, that when a person realises no self, all those thoughts would automatically stop being believed in. Well, that would only be possible if there was an inherent self that was believing in them. Is there? Is there an inherent self that believes the thoughts? And hopefully you realise there is no inherent self believing the thoughts. So, from that position, nothing changes. The thoughts come up. They are believed in. But behind all of it, there is no inherent self. And it may come to you, well, okay, I've gone through all this, well, what's left? What's left for who? The question implies that there is an inherent self that is waiting for something. Is there? If there's no inherent self, that's it. There is no inherent self. The paradox we're left with at the end is, we realise that there is no inherent self when we realise that there is no inherent self to realise it. Is there an inherent self to realise something? No. Therefore, there is no inherent self. All along, it has been the automatic believing in thoughts and the mental processes that's created the illusion that there is. All along, the thoughts were saying I, and they were never questioned until you question them. You, as it states in the sutra, look. If you look into the skandhas, you find them empty. There is no inherent self. That's all you need to do. And all through this video I've been saying, you do this, you do that, you do the other. And all along I have realised that that is just from the conceptual framework. At no stage was I actually communicating with an inherent self, because there isn't one. And at no stage have I been operating that there was an inherent self here communicating with an inherent self there. So you see the I, me, you, self, all these words, concepts, ideas and beliefs, language that we have, we believe that they point to something that is inherently real. But they don't. The inherently real thing that they are suggested that they point to cannot be found, because there is no inherent self. There is no inherent I or me. But that does not mean that the concept, the belief, the idea, I, me, isn't valuable, isn't useful. It certainly doesn't have to be rejected. And you certainly don't go to a position of saying, I don't exist, or there is no me, or there is no I. Because by saying that, you're actually rejecting the concept. And there is a concept. There is a concept, me, I, you, etc., etc. Those don't have to be rejected. They're very useful. It is the rejection of the concepts that causes the fall into nihilism. That I do not exist. There is no me at all. And that's not useful. Because there is nothing wrong with the idea of a person. They don't have the idea that there is someone here, talking to someone there, doesn't have to be rejected. Only seen for what it is. And as I stated at the introduction, all that needs to be done is to see through the illusion. Nothing changes. You don't go from one belief to another belief. You just realize. You see through the illusion. So from this realization that there is no inherent self, you break the first fetter. First fetter is gone. And following down that path, and this is for your information if you want to know where to go to next, once you've realized this. Within the Buddhist path, there is the second fetter, which is doubts about the Dharma, which are broken anyway, specifically because it is realized that all the information that pointed to the realization that there is no inherent self has been realized to be true. There is no more doubt about that, because you've realized it for yourself. So that fetter is broken. And the third fetter breaks. And the third fetter is attachment to rites and rituals. And that's quite easy to describe, because say a person was doing a certain activity, a meditational practice, performing rites and rituals, for the gain of a self, for the gain of an inherent self, to improve an inherent self, that will have been seen to be illusory. There is no inherent self to be improved. There is no inherent self that needs to do a practice to improve an inherent self, because it is seen that there is no inherent self. But of course, if you haven't dropped into nihilism, you'll realise it's perfectly okay to do the rites and rituals. You just don't become attached to them. You do them for their own sake. You don't do them for the attainment or increase or improvement of an inherent self. And the next thing to look at are, and they're joined together, is the fetters 4 and 5. And I think if you've gone through this process with me, you're in a very, very good position to actually move into the 4th and 5th territory, because you've got the tools now, direct pointing tools, to actually look into areas for 4 and 5. Please, if you're interested, go and check another video. I won't detail it fully in here, but I've got a video that details all about looking at fetters 4 and 5, which is specifically suffering, which is desire and aversion. They're linked together. Desire and aversion, which is specifically the push-pull of life. That even after breaking the first fetter, there is still a subtle belief in a self that desires things from life or rejects things from life. So there's a constant push-pull. I want this and I do not want that, which creates mental suffering. And it's the mental suffering specifically you address in 4 and 5. So similar inquiry to the ones for the first fetter, but it has a slightly different outlook, because rather than looking into experience for a self, you take something which would normally create suffering and you look for a mechanism or a person that needs to suffer, or that needs to react, that needs to go into a particular mode. For example, fear, anxiety, depression. You look for a self that needs to go into that mode, as opposed to a self per se, which was the first fetter. Well, thank you for watching this video. As I say, this is the final part, 5th part of the series of 5, looking into realising no self, realising no inherent self, and breaking the first fetter. If you have any particular queries, comments, questions, etc., etc., please write them below. Please click like, click subscribe. I hope you've found this useful. I hope you've broken the fetter. If you haven't, keep looking, and I'll see you inside my next video. Thanks very much. Bye for now.